23, verse 1. Well, 25 is where it ends. In 23, it begins with Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died at Kiryat Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her. Then Abraham rose from beside his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites. And he said, I am an alien and a stranger among you. Sell me some property for a burial site here so I can bury my dead. The Hittites replied to Abraham, Sir, listen to us. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will refuse you his tomb for burying your dead. Then Abraham rose and bowed down before the people of the land, the Hittites. And he said to them, if you are willing to let me bury my dead, then listen to me and intercede with Ephraim, son of Zohar, on my behalf. So he will sell me the cave of Machpelah, which belongs to him and is at the end of the field. Ask him to sell it to me for the full price as a burial site among you. Ephraim, the Hittite, was sitting among his people, and he replied to Abraham in the hearing of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of the city. No, my lord, he said, listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead. Again, Abraham bowed down before the people of the land. And he said to Ephraim in the hearing, listen to me if you will. I will pay the price of the field. Accept it from me so I can bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, listen to me, my lord. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. But what is that between me and you? Bury your dead. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weight current among the merchants. So Ephron's field in Machpelah near Mamre, both the field and the cave in it, and all the trees within the borders of the field were deeded to Abraham as his property in the presence of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of the city. Afterwards, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which is at Hebron in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave in it were deeded to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. And now the blessing after the reading from the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nato botekenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. Yes.
Barbara Smith from Downland Hill, she's on her way to the ER.
Okay.
Very, very battling. She doesn't have the shingles, but really not well today.
Okay, Barbara Smith from our from Redlands congregation. She's sick. She's on her way to the ER. So, Father, we lift up Barbara to you, Lord. That, Father, even right now, Lord, you are putting a healing touch upon her body. That, Father, that she would be healed today, Lord. Lord, be with Barbara, be with the doctors, Lord, that when she goes into the emergency, Father, that they will see her, Father, and they will address whatever is going on in her body. Father, heal her completely. And we ask this in Yeshua's name. Amen. 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 It's wonderful, and I love it. And Tila, I think everybody here, we all have a part in this, that we are a praying congregation.
Amen.
When, and prayer does work, Fortunately for Peggy and I were able to see our brother-in-law who has pancreatic cancer, and he's already lost about 50 pounds, and but his name is Carlos. We prayed for him before, but he's not a believer, so we're still praying for salvation. But I was able to pray with him, and we'll see.
Isaac successful?
We hope Isaac was successful. If you ask grandma and grandpa, we're gonna tell you that my grandson was the best player there, But we hope so. If he is successful, they will get a hold of him by the end of the month. And then he'll be invited to another more advanced workout, and so hopefully we pray, Lord, that he is invited. So, okay, Chayei Sarah, okay, and we are going to be in Genesis 23:1 to 25:18 today. This is one of my favorite parashas. I love this, and one reason I love this is because I'll tell you one thing. I think about when I grew up, going to when we were in school and you study America and how it was founded, world history, all this, and you get all these explorers coming this way, discovering this, discovering that, discovering something that was already there, but you get the one, Ponce de Leon. What was he looking for? The fountain of youth, and sometimes, the very wise, I remember reading an article, and the person says that the very wise people that go out to try to find something use the wisest book there is, and that's the Bible. You use the Bible, there's a good possibility that you're going to find it or come upon it. But this Ponce de Leon, when he was trying to discover the fountain of youth, he went out there looking. I think if he would have went to the Bible and would have been searching for Sarah's tent, he may have found, he could have.
August 19th, 2020, the Holy Spirit said the fountain of youth is found in the living waters of God.
Amen. Amen. If all of you heard that out there, the fountain of youth is found in the living waters of God. Amen. How can you argue with that? How can you argue with the truth? Okay, Sarah is the only woman in Scripture whose age, death, and burial are mentioned. No other person in the Bible as far as women. Yeah, not even Eve. Mary, mother of Yeshua. Yep. Well, we know we'll meet her there. Okay, so Chayei Sarah means the life of Sarah, and that's your first fill-in Roman numeral 1. The life of Sarah. It's ironic in this parashah that the title is the life of Sarah, but actually it's about the death of Sarah. Sarah is also the only woman whose name God changes. In Genesis 17, when Abram was 99 years old, God declared a new name for him, Abraham, a father of many nations, and gave him the covenant of circumcision. God gave Sarai the new name Sarah and blessed her. Sarai means princess. Sarah means my princess. Abraham, Abraham was given the assurance that Sarah would have a son in chapter 17. I like to read this. I pulled this off. In 1996, Rabbi Simon Maslin of the congregation Kesset Israel in Pennsylvania, in 96, he wrote a little article about this parashah. In his review of the parashah, he posed a question, and I'm reading it verbatim. What moral did the rabbis find in the title, The Life of Sarah? They taught that the righteous are called living even after death, while the wicked are called dead even in life. And I thought, boy, that is, yeah, it sure is. He says, I find that the easiest way to answer this question is to look at the facts. Righteous people not only live righteous lives, but they teach others to emulate their actions and find righteousness within their own lives. After the righteous pass, their memory still lives on within the minds and the hearts of those who have learned from them. I think that is so true. Keeping their righteous and positive spirits alive. The opposite approach to this idea is that the wicked spread misery and promote wrongdoings in life. Therefore, in death, they are remembered for the negative impact they have made on the world. I thought that was very good, and then the other thing I found out, the Kaddish prayer. We think of the Kaddish at the mourner's prayer, the mourner's Kaddish. It's the prayer one says when mourning the death of a loved one. The title insinuates that the prayer is all about death, while in reality, the Kaddish celebrates life. In Chayei Sarah, we celebrate the life of Sarah. Though Isaac, through Isaac's marriage, it says, although Isaac was in a period of mourning, he was able to embrace the lessons that his mother taught him during her life. Especially with his marriage to Rebecca. But so the Sarah and the Kaddish prayer, they're focusing or celebrating life more than they are about death. So I thought, that was good. That was really good. But let me go on. Sarah was described as exceptionally beautiful, even as she aged. We were talking about this earlier, Maria and I, and we were mentioning how if you go into the Humash or into any of the Jewish, the Hebrew written Torah, you're gonna find that it says that Sarah was 127 years old, or when she died. Meaning that when she was what the Torah says is or the commentary is that even at 100 years old, she had the features of a 20-year-old. She was, yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's why I really believe that, we always talk about how a person ages gracefully. This woman aged gracefully. And if you've seen, you name the person, boy, she still looks beautiful. She's 80 years old and stuff like that. Well, she may have aged gracefully, but I wonder if Sarah even aged. I wonder if she was still, because if she's going to go down into Egypt and she's already up in years, and Pharaoh is going to want to take her into his harem or as his wife or what, she had to have been just a beautiful lady. She wasn't a slacker. And I don't think, I think if, you think of some of these women like, I'm trying to think of some, like Anne Margaret or Sophia Loren, they're older women, but they've aged. I don't think, oh yeah, plastic surgery does wonder. Yeah,
Maybe she stayed fresh like the Hala.
yeah, I think there's a reason why it says that. That the challah in her tent never went stale, it stayed fresh the whole week. Go ahead, Maria.
The rabbi said that at the age of 100, she looked like she was 20.
Yeah,
And when she was 20, she resembled a child in innocence and beauty of a 7-year-old.
yes, yeah. No, I
That's
read
me.
that, yeah, that's all the women in this room. And zooming in. No, no, you're absolutely right. I think that's why, that sometimes, people read this literally and they'll say, oh, that's ridiculous. Nothing's ridiculous with the Lord.
No.
If he can make it be the way he wants it to be. And like I said, there had to be a reason why twice Abraham had to say, well, this is my sister, or, and because he says, if they see your beauty, well, they're going to kill me, and, and then they'll want you, so there was a reason behind that. Go ahead, Maria.
Didn't her beauty and also Abraham, the stamina, come from when God changed their name and God breathed into him the head, which is the breath, like Abraham?
Yeah.
And Sarah,
Yes,
that breath juvenized them?
right. I don't see why not. I would go, I didn't read that, but I would go with that as soon. Oh, that's just you. Okay. Book of Maria. Okay. Then that is legit. Okay. In letter A, Sarah dies at age 127. 127. I think Paul says he wants to live to be 120, But, Sarah was described as exceptionally beautiful even as she aged. When they traveled to Egypt, Abraham said to her, I know that you are a woman beautiful to behold. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared on your account. And that's in Genesis 12, 11 to 13. So her beauty was affirmed in Egypt, and she was taken into Pharaoh's harem, where she was protected by God, and the truth about her eventually came out. But aside from her attractiveness, Sarah was also barren. Okay, we know that she was barren until her covenant with God, where God promised to give her a child. I read about that. Yeah, she was barren, but there's a few things about her. It's just like I'll get to it later then, so I won't hit you with something and then hit it again. But true to his word, Sarah got pregnant and gave birth to Isaac. Sarah died at age 127 and was buried in Kiryat Arba, which is presently located in Hebron. 3 separate times, the book of Joshua tells us that the city of Kiryat Arba was named after the ruler of the city, a man called Arba, who was a powerful giant, or father of giants. It's Caleb who defeats the giants and takes the city. The cave of Machpelah is in the city. The cave of Machpelah commonly known today as the Cave of the Patriarchs. Okay, and then what else do we know about our matriarch, about Sarah? But before that, have you ever wondered, who's buried in the Cave of Machpelah? Okay, we know that Abraham and Sarah, and then we know Isaac and Rebekah. What's that? And we get there, we say Adam and Eve. How did they get there?
Noah brought the bones into the ark.
There the rabbis will tell us, there'll be commentary about that, where Noah may have brought them in there and put them in there even before they even knew about the cave. Or another commentary says that God placed them there. You see, so but we know that we don't read anything about Abraham or Isaac or Jacob placing Adam and Eve, their bones in there. So were you going to share something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Kirjath Arba, Kirjath is Hebrew for city, Arba is the number 4. So it's literally translated as the city of 4.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that in most commentary is referring to those 4 couples,
Right.
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Adam and Eve.
Yeah. And wasn't that the same thing with the ark? When the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararak, and down below there's a valley, and in English, the translation is the Valley of the Eight. Yeah, the same thing, of the 8 people that were on the ark. So, yeah. So, you know what I do need, Peggy, if you get a chance, a pen or a highlighter. Her burial is, Sarah's burial is the first one to be mentioned in the Bible. She is buried in the Cave of the Patriarchs, and tradition says that both Abraham and Sarah, as well as Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah, and Adam and Eve are buried there. Thank you. She was 10 years younger than Abraham and was married him in Ur of the Chaldees. And we read that but way back in Genesis 11:29. And when you hear about her being a half sister to Abraham, Abraham wasn't lying. Okay, she was Abraham's half sister, and that's in 2012. Sarah is mentioned in the Tanakh in Isaiah 51:2 as the mother of the chosen race. And you'll also read, if you want to write this down, Sarah is also mentioned several times in the Brit Hadashah, in Romans 4:19 and 9:9, in Galatians chapter 4 verse 21, and in Galatians chapter 5 verse 1, and then in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 11, and then in First Peter chapter 3 verse 6. The Midrash says, along with her husband Abraham, Sarah was instrumental in teaching thousands of people about the belief in one God. Abraham would guide the men, and Sarah would influence the women. And and that is where we get to the point where, like, even in the synagogue, you have the men together and sitting together, and then you have the women together. Even the dancing. When we were in Israel, we witnessed a wedding, and I'd like to tell you that all the women were up and dancing, but there were no women dancing. It was all men. All the men were dancing. Yeah, well, it's separate. Yeah. Go ahead, Maria, use your microphone.
Where did you see that Abraham and Sarah were half brother and sister? Because I read that he married his brother's daughter, which made him uncle.
No, it would be, he married his father had another wife that he had a child with. And it was their daughter that he ended up marrying. So it was a half sister. And today, by today's standards, we look at that as, oh, that's ridiculous. But when we were covering the Noah and how the bloodline, if you wanted the bloodline to stay pure, this is you know, that you married within the family. And that's why Abraham sent his servant back to he sent his servant back to his uncle's house or brother's house or whatever to find a wife for his son. You know, he didn't want him to marry anybody from Canaan. So go ahead.
It just says Genesis 20:12. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife.
Yeah,
2012.
I think I gave that earlier.
I
No.
think you did.
Yeah.
Sometimes the Bible says, you know,
Translation.
Yeah.
my mother, which actually is not their mother, but their stepmother or
Right.
their great grandmother.
Right.
They'll say, she was my mother.
No.
They lie.
No. No, I think, you know, and like I said, back then, today it's taboo, you know, it's like, oh my God, you married your cousin or something like that. You know, I remember back with, who was that, Jerry Lee Lewis?
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, oh, you know, yeah, that was a big scandal,
Yeah.
you know. Well, that on several accounts, yeah, a lot of areas, yeah. You know, but
He just died.
Yeah, he did.
just died. Yep. Okay, Sarah was also known for her kindness and her hospitality. Sarah welcomed with open arms all who visit her tent. So the rabbis also tell us, God told Abraham to listen to Sarah. And what do the rabbis say about why would he say, listen to Sarah? You know, we'd think, well, because that's his wife. You should listen to your wife. What the rabbis say is that Sarah was a much greater prophet than Abraham ever was.
Wow.
So, when Sarah was 127 years old and her son Isaac was 37, God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his beloved Isaac on the altar. And we know this portion, but Abraham took his son, he went to Mount Moriah to bring him as a sacrifice. As he was about to slaughter the son, the Lord God sent an angel over to stop him, pleading with him to pause. The angel explains to Abraham that God had never really intended that Isaac be slaughtered, but rather was testing him, wanting Abraham to demonstrate his unwavering love and loyalty to God. Abraham had now proved that he was indeed God-fearing. When Sarah heard that her son had almost died, what the rabbis tell us is it was just too much for her to bear. And Sarah died at 127 years old. So, you know, that would be, you would say that, oh, well, you know, God was, huh?
Where were they?
At that time, when she died, well, he wasn't with his wife. No. I don't know if he was hiding out, but it says that he came to mourn for her, so he wasn't right there. But you know, you think about it, if you heard something like that with your own child, well, you'd be devastated. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I could see how, you know, her only son, you know, and that's what they say, and that's what killed her. Or that's when she died. Okay, instead of just talking about Sarah's death, I felt that because of the title of this Torah portion, we should begin with Sarah's life. We can now, it says, after crying and mourning for Sarah in 23:1-2, Abraham approaches the local people of Kiryat Arba to negotiate for a burial plot. The locals are called Hittites, the sons of Heth, and are designated people of the land. You know, they end up becoming, today, these people are probably enemies of the Israelites. But there was a time when, it's like they became enemies, and then they became friends, and then they became enemies, and you read about some Hittites that ended up attaching themselves, to the Lord. So it's kind of like Ruth. Okay, Ruth, a Moabitess, the Moabites, they didn't take the Israelites too kindly. But then you also have those that they attach themselves to the Israelites. It's like, we know who their God is. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, Heth means terror. And the Hittites are actually listed with the 15 giant tribes. So, in Strong's, they define Heth as an aboriginal Canaanite. So these may well have been giants that he was dealing with there.
Right.
And it's very possible that their cave was just a burial cave for one guy,
Yeah.
Wow.
but they were able to get 4 in there.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Just a thought. Well, I know that when we read later on in the Tanakh, when you read about King David, there was one Hittite that attached himself to David. And if you read the story, it's like you're reading Ruth all over again, because he sent them away. He said, well, go back to your own people. And he says, no. He says, I will not go back.
One of the giant killers.
Yeah, that's right.
From the giant tribe.
Yeah, and he was a Hittite, and they make mention of it. Okay. So in A1, Abraham mourns her passing. Might as well give you B right now. In B, Sarah, the only woman in the Bible, God changes her name. And then in letter C, Sarah was known for her kindness and hospitality. This Midrash interpretation highlights that the unusual nature of the chapter, with its lengthy description of Abraham's purchase, the negotiations, and that is, when you read that, going back and forth, and no, take it, you can have it, no, I want to pay for it, what is $400,
The same thing.
or what's that? Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
the same thing with the threshing floor.
yeah, it's the same thing, you're right. The negotiations go through 3 rounds. Okay, go ahead, Maria.
When you say only 400, actually, it would be like if you went to buy the land and they said, well, I can't sell it, but if I was going to sell it, it would be for $1 million.
Right.
Because he paid 400 shekels. David paid, David paid 50 shekels for the whole mountaintop.
Right.
And to buy a virgin bride was only 100 shekels. So when he paid 400, that was equivalent to about $1 million.
And if I remember right, I don't remember where I read it. In fact, I'm going to cover a little bit of it later on, but I don't know if it was like 200 acres of land or something.
Sure.
I forget, but it was
Valley,
it was
at the end.
exactly. And then we will talk about, the,
Are you gonna talk about the importance of purchasing it?
well, when we get there, why don't you jump in? Okay, because I will hit on something. Okay, like I said, the negotiations go through 3 rounds. Abraham states explicitly that he is seeking a permanent right to the land. He's going to own the land. He's not going to lease it or borrow it or take their gift. He's going to purchase it. The Hittites, like Abraham, avoid the term to sell and state that Abraham should feel free to bury his dead wherever, in whatever tomb he wants. The Hittite spokesperson is non-committal. They do not say yes or no, but leave the matter hanging in the air. This approach assumes that the Hittites wish to avoid the transfer of property rights to a non-native resident. We do not know if this was the custom of that time, we're just speculating, all right? We do know that this is the attitude of the Israelites in their own land elsewhere in the Bible. It does appear that the Hittites respect Abraham, and that is why they are polite with him. In the second round of negotiations, Abraham vows also being polite. The negotiations go back and forth, and Abraham names a specific plot as his preferred burial site, indicating that he will pay its full value for it to be given to him. The Midrash says that this field and cave was shown to Abraham, and a sweet smell of the Garden of Eden resonated from this cave. Okay, Abraham knew that this is where Adam and Eve were buried. At all costs, this is the property Abraham was going to purchase. He wasn't going to bury her anywhere else. It was right here. And really, he was waiting for that amount to be set. Whatever amount it was, he was going to pay it. In round 3, the price is revealed as 400 shekels. This seems to be a very expensive price, but Abraham does not counter, and he pays the full asking price. The field at 400 shekels, then that would be the equivalent of $128,000 at today's standard. Here, we'll stop right here. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
This would make a very
128,000.
interesting study if you could follow through, because Abraham wanted that parcel of property.
Yes.
There's caves everywhere in Israel. He could have gone anywhere and buried his wife.
Yep.
But he wanted this piece, so there's a reason for it. Whether he knew Adam and Eve were buried there or what, we don't know that, but that would be a good undertaking for Maria. Find
Yeah.
out why he wanted that piece of property. See, I'm getting even here with her.
Yeah. And then we could come back and say, 3 years ago,
3 years ago, Maria said that.
No, Pastor Bruce is absolutely right. You wouldn't believe how many times you even read it, that we found a cave and this was buried there or something. I remember one year when we were there, we were just driving right along the highway, and they had it all, remember that? They had all taped off and everything, because I guess they were just widening the road, and they ran into a cave, and so, yeah. So
We went in that one too, didn't we?
we went into one, I remember, yeah.
Right by the side of the road.
As was likely the norm in ancient times, no mention is made of a written contract. Ephron's sale of his land rights to Abraham is narrated as an oral contract with Hittite witnesses to both the agreed terms and Abraham's payment in full. At this point, nobody could dispute it because there were witnesses there. And you know, as of today, if it's not written down in a contract, you know, but back then, if there was more than 1, 2, 3 people there, whatever, there was witnesses there, that was the contract. Hey, yeah, we heard it. He did sell it for that much money, and then it would go on. Maybe years later, somebody would say, well, why does Abraham own all this land? Well, because Ephron sold it to him many years ago, and it would just go on and on and on. And now today it gets to the point where, oh no, that never happened, you know. So the cave and the land now belongs to Abraham, and he could now bury Sarah. This is only one of 3 places that the nations of the world cannot charge Israel and say to them that this is stolen land. And that's what I was going to get at. Even today, you hear it, that this land was stolen by the Israelites, you know. But the 3 places where they can't even argue the point, they are the cave of Machpelah, the Temple Mount, and the burial plot of Joseph. The cave of Machpelah, Abraham paid Ephron. We read it in Genesis 23:16. The Temple Mount, David gave Arnon in 1 Chronicles 21:25. So write that down. 1 Chronicles 21:25. And then the burial plot of Joseph. When it says, and he bought the field in Genesis 33:19.
What was that? First Chronicles 1?
1 Chronicles 21:25. So in letter D, the Midrash, when Sarah heard that Isaac was going to be sacrificed, she died. The Bible indicates that Sarah died of natural causes. I don't think so. Oh, yes, go ahead, Pastor
You know,
Bruce.
it's interesting, the 3 places that were purchased are off limits to both Jews and Christians to this very day. Yeah, you know, you can get into Hebron, but you're risking your life to do it.
Yeah.
You can get into Shechem, but that's even harder than Hebron. Shechem is a murder capital.
Yeah.
They won't let you, that's where Joseph's bones are. And then, of course, the Temple Mount, you can only go up there if they decide to allow you on that particular day.
Yeah. And that's a daily occurrence, as he said. You know, you can make a trip all the way to Israel. Now I'm going up to the Temple Mount, get there, and they say, no, it's closed today. And and it doesn't matter what you say, it's what they say. So yes, Bernadette, use the microphone. But we were there, the times that we've been there, we've been fortunate, we've been able to get up. Yeah, we've been able to get up to the Temple Mount. Yeah, we did.
Okay, I'm not sure exactly what verse it's in, but the one that says we to go a year later and get your family's bones, or was that person that has been put to sleep?
What's the question?
Like you're supposed to go,
Well, I'm not sure it's a scripture that says that, but
Yeah.
that's Jewish tradition.
Jeremiah? Yeah, that.
It's Jewish tradition that they go and they dig up the body after a year. And then they put the bones in an ossuary.
Yeah. With
And then they carry those bones wherever, that's how they carried Joseph out of Egypt.
right.
So I think I can't think of a scripture reference for that, but
Is
it's,
it in Jeremiah?
well, it happens often in the word. You read about that happening, but I'm not sure it's a commandment. You
Yeah.
dig them up after a year.
Yeah.
Joseph asked that his bones be taken to the promised land rather than left in Egypt.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that's debatable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's debatable because I've heard that. that the fact that he was embalmed, they took the whole body and they buried him in Shechem. But Joseph,
Well, when they say they carried the bones is a, yeah, it's a, what am I thinking of? It's, like, Turkey Day, what is that? It's an idiom for the dead.
right?
So whether they're embalmed or just the bones is really not the issue. The issue is they're taking this dead thing.
Is that why they're against cremation? They didn't cremate them or?
I'm not sure about that. I think the cremation thing is more, we're told in the word, we're gonna return to dust. And one of the issues, I touched on this weekend, and one of the reasons the Jews won't light a fire on Shabbat is because that's a creative miracle. Because your fire turns other elements such as wood into a different substance. So you're actually creating something new that never existed. So so if you believe that, then that would be an issue for cremation, against cremation,
Right.
because you wouldn't want to turn this loved one into a different element or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what the reasoning is, but
Because if they're against cremation, how do they justify the 6 million that were cremated?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that-
Yeah.
Yeah. That's hard. That's hard, but it's just like when the prophet says that, these bones live? And when with that, the understanding is that they weren't cremated, that they were buried.
Even when the ship Titanic went down, couldn't find any bones.
Yeah, they couldn't find
The
anything.
minerals and the sauce of the water just disintegrated them.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's the same. Yeah, you're right. It's just like Pearl Harbor, they've gone down and yeah. And,
Bodies are still there.
yeah, that's what they say. The bodies are still there, but who knows what the water has done to them. Yeah. Go ahead, Bernadette.
Okay, I kind of forgot what was that one. I'm not sure if it's a question or more like a comment, but the marrow in the bones.
Yeah, you got it. It's,
Okay, the marrow in the bones, that means there's life in the blood, right? That's in the
Right.
marrow.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, I don't,
But
That
after
might be-
death, everything ceases. And
But-
decays.
but the blood doesn't. The blood doesn't
Yeah.
cease,
Well,
isn't it?
When you die.
dries up.
yeah, it dries up and eventually disintegrates.
So, okay, then I do have a question. Okay, so,
Keep it right.
okay, I'm not sure how to ask the question.
She's on.
Okay.
But if, so if someone's sleeping, that's how I view it, they're asleep, right?
That's an understanding, because I know that the Bible says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But the other understanding is you go to sleep.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
What's the question?
I don't know, I got lost, I forgot, but
So,
I think for me, it's because I feel like with my dad, I think I feel some kind of way, like I feel like my dad actually went to sleep. I watched him, I seen him. And my perception of
Yeah.
it, and I dream, in my dreams, I dream my dad is alive, and I dream my brother too, that's not here. Not my oldest brother, but my other brother that's not here anymore. I dream them alive, and I've been told in my dreams that it's holy ground where they're at.
Yeah. Well, but aren't both of them glorious? I mean, either way, you're absent from the body. Oh, you're with the Lord. The other one, you're asleep, and when you wake up, whoa, man, this,
The spirit is alive, but the
Yeah.
body is decayed because it says you will receive a new body.
right,
You won't receive this one.
Yeah,
right.
this
Right.
body returns to dust, period.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
The whole thing, the whole enchilada, the marrow, the bones. Yeah, That's right. Yeah, everything returns to the dust of the earth, so. And that's okay, because you're getting a new body anyway.
Amen.
He's not,
Amen.
he's not reworking this one.
Amen. Amen.
He renews your mind, so your mind remains and your spirit remains. But your body, you're given a whole new one.
Okay.
You know, and I think about that. We're gonna receive a new body, and hallelujah. Except Sarah. Sarah's gonna, she's so beautiful. I mean, I'm just making an assumption there. Yeah. But,
Can you imagine what Eve was like?
yeah, that's right.
Before the fall.
Before the fall. Yeah, yeah. Well, all of them. Yeah, all of them. Go ahead, Maria.
Why didn't they take the bones of Rachel and bury it with Jacob, since he loved her more than Leah?
Because Leah is his first wife. And that is why. Leah, maybe in the eyes of Jacob, she wasn't his
She was the
favorite.
only wife, and
but-
Rachel was the second.
You're right. You're right. So I just, I could understand that. Who deserved to be there? If there was only one, I would say Leah.
We've been for Leah.
Me too.
And Rachel.
Me too. There,
Leah,
that's it.
Better than Rachel.
Leah. Leah, six of the tribes come from Leah. Six
Yeah,
out of the 12
yeah,
tribes.
yeah.
So-
The daughter.
Yeah, but the daughter doesn't really count as a tribe. Let me clarify that.
You better watch out,
There,
Bruce.
there may have been other daughters too. We're not sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But, yeah, so she's the mother of 6 of the 12 tribes. So in Judaism, she has an incredible
Oh, yeah.
position.
Yes.
And you can't ignore that. Plus the fact that she is the first wife. So when you're gonna be buried in the cave with the patriarchs and the matriarchs, she was the matriarch.
Yeah.
Rachel really wasn't considered one of the matriarchs of Israel.
She only had 2.
Yeah, and only one of those,
Benjamin.
Benjamin, even carries on a tribe. The other, the tribe of Joseph is intermingled.
Right. You know, but there had to be a whole understanding there, because you think about Abraham, you know, after Sarah dies, then he goes back with Hagar. And when here where Sarah died, when Abraham dies, the 2 sons, they reconcile and they bury him along with his wife. But later on, like when Hagar dies, you don't read anything about them saying, well, hey, maybe we should bring Hagar there. No, it was already etched out that no, it's going to be Abraham and Sarah, and then it'll be Rebecca and Isaac, and then Jacob and Leah. So I don't know how they came about. I'm talking about Isaac and Ishmael, but they, you know, there was no, I guess there was no, not even a thought of where they're going to bury Hagar. Go ahead.
I think a lot of it comes down to, this was a prophetic gesture.
Yeah.
Because the Lord knew the beginning from the end.
Right.
So this property is very contested by the 3 monotheistic religions of the world.
Yeah.
Judaism, the Muslims and the Christians, just like the Temple
Just like,
Mount. And so we're fighting over this property. No one fights over, Mecca.
Yeah.
No one fights over Mecca. And that's the most holy site in the Muslim world.
Right.
So no one cares. We don't care if you have your holy site, that's fine. The problem comes down to these 3 turfs. And it's all about the land. Not all about the land, but remember what I said, if you're studying the land, then it's all about the land. If you're studying Sarah, it's all about Sarah. So it
Right.
just depends on what you're studying, but the land is crucial. God said to all the other council of the gods, in fact, he divided up the 70 nations. We went over this at Sukkot. If what I was saying is correct, then he has his council of 70 gods, and he divvies up the entire world to those 70 gods, but he says Israel's mine. So now what does the enemy want? The enemy wants Israel.
He want, yeah.
No one's
Absolutely.
fighting over Tehran.
Yeah.
No one cares.
I noticed that they fight over the Temple Mount,
Yeah.
but they are not the cave where the bodies are, because I think once you said that there was trash and graffiti all over
Yeah.
the tombs.
Same thing with Joseph's tomb.
Nobody,
Yeah.
nobody cares about
The-
really.
The Muslims are donkeys, they're asses. That's what the Bible says, they're wild donkeys.
Wild donkeys.
And they trash even their most, Hebron is Abraham's tomb, that he's the father of in their estimation, he's the father of the Muslim faith.
Yeah.
So this is their spiritual father, and yet they trash the area.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we don't fight over it because you can't even get in. You can get in there, but you're risking your life.
And in fact, the sign says in Hebrew,
Yeah.
and I think it did say it in English too, basically, enter at your own risk. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to get into Hebron once or I wanted to go, and they said, man, you gotta wear a turban, you gotta carry a Quran, or you'll be killed.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Right.
So,
No.
no, I didn't do it. No, but even Shechem on was our last trip when we went to Shiloh, we
Yeah,
looked,
we looked
down on Shechem. Because to go into that city, that's Jacob's well, that's Shechem, that's where Joseph's bones are.
Right.
We were up at Shiloh looking down.
And you
if
could see
go-
it off in a distance.
Yeah, if you go down there, you may be killed. I mean, they're not, so those areas aren't even contested because you can't even get close to them. Time went, they loosen up. You know what? What the Muslims want is your money. So it all comes down to money always, so. Yeah, but the average Muslim doesn't have any shares in oil. So they want the tourist money, so they loosen the rules from time to time.
Right.
But then it goes back as soon as they,
Mount Sinai.
all
Yep.
of it. That's how they operate.
Yeah, and you're right. It's just like Mount Sinai. It's fenced off. Nobody can go in. But if you have the right amount of money, they're gonna allow you to get close enough, so for a minute, yeah. Now leave and empty your pockets. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to, here in Roman numeral 2. Abraham buys the cave of Machpelah and the surrounding fields. See, that's one thing you got to understand. A lot of times people think, well, he bought the caves of Machpelah, but he also purchased the surrounding fields. And a lot of that is in dispute, or, it's okay when they read it, but yet it's not okay where they're living, because a lot of this is even in their Quran. Okay, but that just goes to show you they don't even believe in their own Quran.
It's the Muslim faith didn't come into operation till 632 AD.
Right.
So before that, the Arabs' holy book was the Tanakh.
Yeah.
Period. The Torah. That was their holy book. And that's why you see so much carryover into the Quran, because Muhammad plagiarized a lot of it and brought it right in.
It would have been just the first 5 books, right? Not the whole.
It's just the
Yeah.
first 5 books. Yeah, not necessarily the entire Tanakh.
Right.
Because you have to remember that the Tanakh, even when King David was alive, there was only 7 or 8 books in the Old Testament. The rest weren't even written yet. So they operated predominantly off the Torah.
Right. Okay, in letter A, Roman numeral 2, letter A, 3 key places our forefathers purchased. Machpelah, the Temple Mount, and Joseph's burial place. Okay, let's move on to chapter 24. In chapter 24, we meet Abraham's trusted servant. Here in chapter 24, when we talk about this servant, it wasn't just, it says his trusted, well, we read it as his trusted servant. But this servant was so attached to Abraham. Abraham and Sarah, well, really, Abraham was willing to give everything to this servant, everything, because he could not have a child. Okay, so that's where it was at. But then once he had the child, this servant didn't run off. He was still his trusted servant, So here in chapter 24, the servant's name is never mentioned. We would have to go back to chapter 15 to see who Abraham's most faithful servant is. And in Genesis 15, verses 2 and 3, it says, but Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me, since I am childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Abram also said, since you have given me no son, one who has been born in my house is my heir. Why would Abraham, most trusted servant, go nameless in this chapter? Is the question. Okay. After Eliezer had encountered Rebekah and realized that she was the one who was sent to find, he requested permission from her father and brother that she return with him to marry Isaac. His initial statement to them is, I am the servant of Abraham. And that's in Genesis 24:34. And indeed, throughout this journey, he is constantly referred to as the servant. I think that's a very good indication to a lot of us, where when serving the Lord, we don't have to be high on the horse or high up there in stature. We are servants. And what does the Lord say? That he's not, he wants us to serve. Go ahead, Tila.
Well, I really liked, in chapter 24, the very first, second verse, where it says, please put your hand under my thigh,
Right.
and I will make you swear. And isn't that kind of I don't know what to call it. Anyway, we give our heart to the Lord.
Yeah.
That's what we say, a covenant, that's that covenant. And I thought that was so, people might look at that, just a non-person just reading and they say, wow, that's kind of weird. But it's not when you think of in the spiritual realm, as far as how we say, Father, I give you my heart, I give you my soul, I give you my being. It's the same, it's very
Same thing.
Similar.
I think
And
that
we become
yeah.
servants.
And I think that is even more, that's better than, I remember back in the days when we used to, well, here, let's shake on it. And, and that was the agreement. Well, you shook on it. So that that's giving your word. Yeah. Okay. First, Maria.
I steal Pastor Bruce thunder, but in one of his sermons regarding this, Pastor Bruce said that it was because it was close to the reproductive organs. That's why the hand was put close under his thigh.
Yeah, it was to,
Did I steal it?
no, I was gonna go somewhere else, but I will comment on it. That has to do with progeny and extending into the future. So it's a covenant that's made until the end or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So, no, what I was gonna say is in Genesis 24:12, the very first recorded prayer in the Bible.
Which one?
Yeah.
24:12, and we still take the
Yeah.
Jews still take the format of this, Baruch atah Adonai, blessed
got it.
are you, O Lord God. And they use this. Also, when I taught on the Jewish wedding, the servant here is referred to as the Shadchan. And the Shadchan is the Jewish word that's loosely thought of to be like the matchmaker. So the Shadchan goes, so, and so in other words, the symbolic of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. So the Spirit goes out to find a bride for the Son. And that's the prophetic picture of this chapter.
Okay, why would Abraham's most trusted servant go nameless in this chapter? By his name not being mentioned, we learned that this was not all about Eliezer, the person. This was about the mission. This is what this parashah or this chapter is focused on, is the mission. Okay, and we could put anybody else in there on any mission that we do. It's not about the person. And I look at this as it's just like a healing touch. If a person gets healed, it's not the person who prayed for him. It's the Lord using that vessel as the means for him to go in and heal this person. So it's all about the mission. Or what do we say before? It's all about the journey. Yeah. Eliezer was so dedicated to Abraham that at no time did his own self-interest get in the way of fulfilling that mission. He was just a servant, an extension of Abraham's hand, so to speak. Think about it. Here is Eliezer, at one time the heir of all that Abraham owned. And like I said earlier, after the birth of Isaac, he lost everything, so to speak. Okay, now everything that was going to be handed over to him, now it all belongs to Isaac. Eliezer was happy with whatever Abraham gave him. He was just as happy as can be. And that's where we should be. We should just, Lord, use me. It might be something that you might think to yourself that it's not very big, a big task that the Lord is giving, but be happy where he is using you. To Eliezer, his task of finding a wife for his master's son was his goal. So that's what he focused on. He focused on what Abraham wanted him to do, and that's all he focused on at that time to accomplish what he was set out to do. One characteristic of Eliezer's mission was his tremendous focus. If you remember when we read in there in chapter 24, it was like, do you remember where it's read, where we read, well, let her stay here for a few days, well, maybe 10 more days. They said, no, let's, I got to go now. I was reading in one commentary too, that the journey was a long journey. It was going to be like a 3-month journey to get from where he was at to where the relatives lived. It would have been a 3-month journey, but it says in the Midrash that he made it there in 3 days.
Pretty incredible.
That's pretty incredible. I'm not gonna believe that. Well, with the Lord, everything is possible. Go ahead.
You know, we're out of touch with journeys in
Yeah,
our age, but when the pioneers came west, the covered wagons averaged about 10 miles a day. So that was it. So
yeah,
often they could actually see where they were gonna camp that night.
yeah,
Because 10 miles, next time you're driving on that strip out to the desert, I mean, out to Vegas, some of those strips between mountain peaks, some of those valleys are 20, 25 miles long.
Yeah.
And we cover it in, 25 minutes or so.
right.
And it would have taken them 2.5 days, and they could have woken up in the morning and said, we're gonna camp down where we see those trees down there.
Right.
And we don't realize that, but.
Yeah.
Same thing here, and the trip from Laban's house, depending on exactly where he lived, could have been anywhere from 900 to 1,500 miles.
Yeah.
So do the math and you can figure out it's a journey. No, and you're bringing your maid, all your servants, all of the supplies.
Right,
You need
right.
supplies for 3 months.
Yeah.
You've got, this is a wagon train.
Yeah.
This isn't just Pony Express.
I don't know, many of you may have heard stories from your mother, from your grandmother. And I remember hearing the story from my grandmother on my mom's side. And she tells a story of how her grandfather was an Indian scout. And he would bring people across the land. Well, he had, the way I hear it is they had 16 children. And it seemed like they laughed because when they're telling this, they're laughing because they said, well, yeah, he would take off and go back east and come out, and then there was another child there, So, but that's how it worked, he wouldn't see his wife, but for, a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time, but just long enough. Go ahead, Maria.
Want to tell a rabbit trail
Uh-huh.
regarding this one over here. She told me once at the dinner table, how was it, mommy, crossing the country in a wagon train?
Well, it's better than.
And after she picked herself up,
What was it that one of our kids said, Peggy, to me, that did I shoot?
How many Indians did you shoot in?
Yeah, how many Indians did I shoot? What, was somebody else gonna say something? Okay. Well, I mean, kids. Yeah. Okay, it says that when Eliezer, his mission, he had tremendous focus on what was at hand. When he arrived, he didn't first go around to see the local attractions. In fact, he didn't even check into the local inn or, hotel to rest for his journey. Instead, he went straight to work. When he arrived, as Pastor Bruce was saying, here it is, the first mention of a prayer. Okay, immediately he started to search for Isaac's future wife. And even after he found Rebekah and deemed her worthy of his master's son, he still didn't allow himself to relax. When he was invited to Rebekah's home, the entire family sat down to eat, and he proclaimed, I will not eat until I have spoken my words. And then he went on, I am Abraham's servant, and on. So Eliezer was very focused on what he was there for. Go ahead. Maria.
The test that Rebecca did was the watering of the camels, right?
Right.
I just want to clarify, because Pastor Bruce said that she had to go down these, a flight of stairs to get it, or did she? draw it up?
Possibly. Well, you
Oh,
see,
well.
we've been there and we've seen some of these, I don't know what they call it, tavern or whatever, but these wells. And there are steps that go all the way down to the bottom, and you're talking at least about 20, 30 feet or more. Yeah, it's way down there. Okay. That has to be 90 feet, yeah.
Stairs are not nice stairs.
No, no.
Any handrails?
But, you know, but then again, what do the rabbis say? Well, what they say is when she went to draw the water, Maria, the water came up to her.
I should hope so. What,
Okay. 10 camels.
How many jars of water?
Yeah.
does one camel drink?
They can drink about 25 gallons
One.
Per
camel.
per camel.
And a gallon of water is nearly 8 pounds.
So that 250
Yeah.
jars of water. She should have gotten more than a gold bracelet.
Yeah, that was for one camel.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredibly huge.
But that's what the rabbis, I don't know if anybody out there have read about that too, but they say that the water rose up to her and she did not have to go down to fetch it. Every time I think of a well, I think of like today's wells, where like you said, they, you know, put it down.
Press the button.
Yeah. No, if we were talking about that with my grandson when we were practicing, while he was practicing, can we go out and buy him a bottle of water? And we said, yeah, you know, so we go out and get him his water, but we tell him that back in our days, all we did was turn on the faucet, get the water hose, and you know, that was how we got our water, you know? Uh-huh. Yep. Yep. So when Rebecca's family requested that she be given several months to prepare herself for marriage, it seemingly, it was a reasonable demand. Hey, can she stay here? I think the word might say for a few days, but they really meant longer than that. But Eliezer responded, "Do not delay me. Send me away, and I will go to my master." And he got his way. He didn't feel compelled to comply with the social norms or standards of where he was at. He knew that his mission would succeed even if he were asking for the impossible. And do you remember what did Eliezer tell Abraham before that? He said that, well, what if she won't come with me? You know, should I take Isaac with me to this land? He said, no. You know that Isaac is the only one of the patriarchs that never left the land. He never left the land. Okay. You notice that everything he asked the Lord for, it was given to him. The Hebrew name Eliezer means God is my help. It's also interesting to note that Eliezer traveled some 450 miles when where he found Rebecca in the town of Nahor in Mesopotamia. But like I said, the sages say that this was one of the miracles God gave Eliezer. There's two ideas or two thoughts there. One says that he arrived in one day. The other one says that in 3 days he arrived. 450 miles to go, but yet, you know, like they said, he was there. It says when he arrived. It doesn't say anything about when he left. So, but in verses 62 to 67, we read, and it says, now Isaac had come back from a journey to Berlachore, for he was living in the Negev. Isaac went out to meditate in the field towards evening. And he raised his eyes and looked, and behold, he saw camels that were coming. Rebekah raised her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. And she said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." Then she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother's Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death.
How was she?
Rebekah, oh my gosh, Maria, I think it's not sure. No, there's somewhere that it does mention about,
He was
Hey.
40.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was 40. There's ideas that she was as young as 13, 15, you know. I would have to get back with you on that. Go ahead, Tila.
Well, I like I looked this up before and I had it written in my Bible. It says the well, that bear, you say it in Hebrew, is the well of the one who lives and sees me. Because he used to always go out there by the well. Okay? He used to go by the well. But then my question is, it says he takes her into his mother's tent.
Yeah,
Okay, so why would he take her into his mother's tent? Was Sarah's tent still there? And I also want to know, how big was the tent? I mean, I don't know why I went onto this rabbit trail, but how big were these tents that they traveled with? Or I know he didn't travel with it. It was right there, you know, that he built it or had it.
what's the name of the Bejula? What are they called?
The Bedouin,
The Bedouin. Okay, you're probably gonna hit on that?
yeah, I
Okay.
can. The Bedouins, live in tents. They don't really, it's not like a pup tent where you pack it up. and then
Not at all.
hike 10 miles. They keep adding on to these tents. They're massive.
Mhm.
They have great rooms. They have bedrooms.
Oh,
And they're made of anything they can get their hands on for covering. And so apparently, well, we know that Rebekah has died. And so Isaac takes her tent. Abraham has
Sarah.
his tent. He takes, you know, what I say, he takes Sarah's tent, because Sarah had a tent as well.
yes.
So Abraham has a tent, Sarah has a tent, the kids have their tents. It's not that they all live under the same roof. Abraham's tent is kind of like the meeting hall of the township, where all the meetings are done. It's the gates to the city. It's where the business is conducted. It's a man cave, yeah. So, Sarah's tent is now vacant, so Isaac moves up. It's just like when our kids, as Daniel left home, Kelly moved into Daniel's room and Kenny moved into
Right, Right.
Kelly's room. You know, you're upgrading. And this is kind of the picture that we get here, is this upgrading. It's also interesting, I was gonna comment on this, in verse 65, she says, "Who's this man walking in the field?" The servant says, "He's my master." This is not Abraham that's out in the field, this is Isaac.
it's a,
So part of what you have to remember is when, you know, in our society, he would have been waiting for the old man to die so he could have his freedom. He would have had his freedom, he would have had all the belongings, all of that.
I didn't even think about that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, now because Isaac is the new leader, the servant just migrates right under him. He's now Isaac's servant.
Right.
See what I'm saying? And he's
Right.
probably crossing over here because Abraham's still alive for a while.
Yeah,
So he gave up his freedom as well as those riches. He could have gone to Haran. Remember, Abraham told him, he said, "If you go and you can't find, I release you from the oath."
right.
See, so he had an out. He could have fudged and said, "No, I'm not gonna find anybody, because I'm gonna go back, report it. The old man's getting old, he's gonna kick, and I'm gonna get everything he owns, and I won't be a servant anymore, I'll be the ruler."
But it's amazing how everything that Eliezer, the servant, asked for, the Lord provided. Every question or that he would ask, it was answered. Go ahead, Maria.
I think with all the time that he spent with Abraham and what he went through, that he was called a servant just because, but I think he was more than a servant. He was more like an adopted son.
Yeah.
Because in the book of Jasper, it says he was one of the servants that went with Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. And when he was waiting, when Abraham took off, he talked to Ishmael and said, if Abraham does sacrifice Isaac, he will be the heir. So he still was thinking, and with all the years that he spent with Abraham as his number one, he must have accumulated a huge wealth.
Right.
That if he did take off, he would be a rich man in himself, but he didn't, he stayed.
You know what? And I think about that, accumulating a huge wealth. I don't even know if he accumulated anything. He was so content with what he was being given. At some time, he probably could have, but that wasn't even his focus. And like you said, when he went to sacrifice Isaac, that would have been his trusted servant. That is who he would have taken with him, up there. So, and what we're getting at here, let's see, in Roman numeral 3, Abraham sends his servant to find Isaac a wife. So it sends. In letter A, God, the God of Abraham, is with Eliezer. And in letter B, Isaac marries Rebekah. And when we read that in there, I don't know if it was said, but when he said that he takes her into his mother's tent, that is referring to he marries her. He marries Rebekah.
Didn't they have a ceremony like?
I don't know if that was important. I know it. I don't know if that was important, but I would imagine, yeah, there was some type of ceremony. But so Isaac was praying in the field. And while he was praying, he looked up, and there out in the distance, he could see the camels coming towards him. Some commentaries say that Isaac was just out walking and not praying at all. Okay. Another says that Isaac was using this moment at the end of each day to have some time for himself to process the significant life events he had recently experienced. Okay, let me stop right here. Oh, okay. All right. I will. Thank you. Okay, at times, seclusion from others allow us to be in touch with our innermost feelings and reflect on our own needs. And there are a lot of us that we just like to get away, I know a dear friend of mine that likes to get here before service and go inside a room and just pray, and so there's times that's what we need. We just need to pray, and there's time when we pray for others. Before you go up to pray for them, you just meditate yourself and pray. We know it was Abraham who sent his servant out to bring a wife back to his son Isaac. But we are never told that Isaac knew about the arrangement that his father had made. In fact, when we read all this, how when he came in and the servant relayed to Isaac everything that had happened, that may have been the first time that Isaac realized everything that was in place. Everything that was, I didn't know that. I didn't know my dad did that, but Off in the distance, Rebecca too could see a man walking towards them. So she asked the servant, who is this man? It's Isaac, she is told. She was able to see her future husband, but she put on a veil over her face so Isaac could not see what she looked like when they got close. And that is customary. Even today, how many of you, do you remember your marriage when you wore a veil? I know, and then we used to do it that way. That's right. That's right. Yes, go ahead, Bruce.
This is a fairly prophetic verse, 65,
Mhm.
because the bride sees the bridegroom from a distance, but through a veil. Does that ring any bells? See, this is prophetic. The Shadchan goes and finds the bride, brings it back to the son. This is very prophetic of the Jewish wedding and our relationship with the Lord. So she sees through the veil and dimly. So very prophetic, this whole thing.
This
is very
whole thing,
prophetic.
yep. Okay, so let's move on. The Torah tells us that Isaac indeed finds the comfort for which he is searching. I could imagine that after his mom died, his closeness to her and everything, that it was like, how am I going to get over this? Rebecca becomes a source of support and love for him. Isaac then brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he took Rebecca as his wife. Isaac loved her and thus found comfort in his mother's death. The Midrash reports that as long as Sarah was alive, there used to be a spirit, a cloud over her tent, a spiritual cloud over her tent. And then it says the doors were open to offer hospitality. It also says the bread displayed signs of having been blessed, and a light burned from one Shabbat evening to the next. The candle never went out. Okay. All of these miracles ceased when Sarah died. And then it says that when Rebecca was brought into the tent, all these miracles came back. So I could see how he could, like Pastor Bruce was saying about the tents, it isn't uncommon. I mean, because we're looking from a distance when we're traveling there. And the tents, I'm thinking they got to be bigger even than this room.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like maybe from the end of this all the way to the other side. The tents were huge. And I don't know about you, but I know with my father-in-law, when my mother-in-law passed away, when Peggy's mom passed away, my father-in-law, he wouldn't remove anything from the closets, from the drawers. Everything was just left there because it was a reminder of his wife, and it was just like that. The tent could have been, let's just tear it down, or something like that. No, leave it there. I wonder if that was his source of comfort, even after she died, that he would walk into the room. Oh yeah, the candles weren't lit or whatever, they went out, but at least it was comfort to him to go in there and pray, to just meditate, but like I said, all this did return when Rebecca was brought into the tent. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, the serpent is referred to as the Shadchan, symbolic of the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, who is also in the Brit Hashah called the Comforter.
Right.
Amen. Yeah,
So you can see how all this ties together.
right. Okay, now we're going to go to Genesis 25. And in Genesis 25, we're going to discuss Abraham's death and his descendants. And and then this parashah, it only goes from verse 1 to 18. Okay, the first verse in Genesis 25 will spark a discussion as to who really is Abraham's second wife. The first verse says, now Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. Maria and I were discussing this early on, but some Bible scholars believe that Keturah was actually Hagar. Okay, that's questionable, but what is not questionable is of the relationship between Abraham and Keturah. The word clearly states that Abraham took her as his wife. So who was Abraham's wife, Keturah? Let's look back a little. Okay, let's go to Genesis 11:29. And it says that Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. Then in Genesis 25:1, it says, now Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. The same verb took is used in both verses. That gives us a clear understanding that Abraham had taken on these two women as wives. And we all know about Sarah, but what do we know about Keturah? Okay, in First Chronicles chapter 1, verse 32, Keturah is referred to as Abraham's concubine. A concubine held a position somewhat above that of a slave, yet she was not free, nor did she have the status or the rights of a wife. The master of the concubine had relations with her. If the concubine bore him children, then those children held an inferior status to those that were born to a wife. But they could be elevated to the position of a full heir at the will of the master. So to be a concubine meant that her master had a wife. So Keturah had to have been around while Sarah was alive. Otherwise, she wouldn't be called a concubine, as it says in First Chronicles 1:32. So you see where I'm going with this. Okay, in Genesis 25:6, it says that the sons of Abraham's concubines were sent away. This wouldn't be true of children from a full marriage, but it would be truly consistent with the children of a concubine. These children would have been sent away in the same way Ishmael was sent away. So if you see what I'm saying here is, now you see why a lot of the rabbis in their commentaries believe that Keturah was actually Hagar. Go ahead, Maria, jump right in there and let me have it.
Okay, we'll go by the age.
Uh-huh.
At this time, Abraham was about 140.
Mhm. Yeah. I
He
mean, I'm
was
just saying,
He
yeah,
was 100 when they told him he was going to, or he had Isaac.
yeah,
He was 100. When he went to sacrifice Isaac, he was about 37
yeah,
in that neighborhood. So that would make him about
137.
close to 100.
Yeah, you're right. That's what I meant by
When
that.
he
Like,
had
yeah, you're right in
Hagar,
there.
the first time with
Yeah.
Ishmael, she must have been what, 20?
Mhm.
So at this time, she would be like 60, in her 60s, and she's having all these babies.
They did.
Oh,
Look at Sarah.
Sarah was, wait a second, she had the Holy Spirit there.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah,
Pastor Bruce,
I disagree.
defend me, Pastor Bruce.
Well, I'm not sure exactly which
No,
way
I'm
you were
just-
actually going, but I disagree with the rabbis that this is Hagar. And the reason I
Yeah.
do is because the prophetic word over Hagar was she was gonna have 12 tribes come from her, and there's 15 sons mentioned here.
Right.
So that becomes a little problematic. with her actually being Hagar and not somebody else.
Right,
I personally think Keturah is her own person. Hagar, a tradition tells us that she went down into Egypt
right,
and became, basically a queen down there. Maybe not officially, but,
She was related to the daughter of a pharaoh.
yeah, and she had 12 sons. I mean, that was the prophecy over her was the same prophecy given over Jacob.
Ishmael
Right.
had 12 sons.
Right.
She only had one. Ishmael. Hagar.
No, the word was for
Ishmael.
Hagar. Remember, the angel prophesied over Hagar out in the wilderness, said, you're gonna be blessed with 12 tribes.
Well, wasn't she blessed through a son?
through the sun.
She had 12.
Well, I guess she could have been. I didn't personally take that way, but yeah, you have a point. I mean, we could go that way.
So she
But
was-
here we have a list of 15 either way, so, and Ishmael's not even in this list.
She was-
Right.
She was already long in the truth to have 6 kids.
Right. Well, Abraham was said to be old and beyond having children at age 100. And that's what it said, but that's what it says in Genesis 18:11. Write that down, Genesis 18:11. Paul referred to Abraham as being as good as dead as far as bearing children was concerned in Romans 4:19. The 6 sons born to Keturah mentioned in Genesis 25 would had to have been born to a man at least 140 years old if Abraham really did marry Keturah after Sarah died. These children listed in verse 2 would have been more of a miracle than Isaac. Okay, the point we need to consider in Genesis 25, 1-6 is that Abraham became the father of many nations, holding to the promise God gave to Abraham in Genesis 17:4, that he would be a father of multitude of nations. Keturah, whichever way you want to go, was a concubine of Abraham, but I don't believe, as some Bible scholars believe, that Keturah was actually Hagar. I'm putting a thought out there, okay? The reason I don't believe that is because of Genesis 25:2, mentions the names of 6 sons born to Keturah, and Ishmael is not one of them. Okay. Also, when we look back at Genesis 25:6, it says, but to the sons of his concubines. That tells us that Abraham had more than one concubine. So getting back to the first verse in Genesis 25, when it says that Abraham took another wife after Sarah died, I believe Abraham married his concubine, Keturah, and made her his wife. Okay, let me give you some fill-ins here. In Roman numeral 4, Abraham marries another wife named Keturah. In letter A, Abraham had 6 more sons with Keturah. Okay, we'll stop right there.
Can I give the other?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Give them all, hon. All right. You guys don't get them, but Zoom people do. I'm just,
There's Zoom.
there's Zoom. Okay, whatever, we can only guess, when you get to Genesis 12-18, we can only guess if Abraham did not include Ishmael among those who received gifts while he was living, verse 6. Whatever the truth really is, Ishmael returned to join Isaac to bury his father. We covered that a little earlier, okay? At least a temporary truce was made to facilitate the burial of the father. They buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field that Abraham had purchased for Sarah himself and their descendants. Although Abraham was dead, the purposes and promises of God remained in effect. Okay, in verse 11, Moses reminds us of this truth. And it became about after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac lived in Beth-leharod. Go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, in verse 20, in verse 6,
Uh-huh.
25:6, it really alludes to the idea that the Keturah was his wife, but he also had sons from his concubines.
Right.
So,
Right.
and they're not even listed,
Yeah.
just as there's gifts given to them. So I mean, it's pretty clear in the English, but to the sons of his concubines. So I would think that that means he has sons from these other women as well. We're not even told how many.
Right. Right.
He was a busy guy.
He was busy.
Yeah, he wasn't fooling around.
Oh, through Isaac, the conventional or through Isaac, the promises were to be carried on. Okay. The work of God continues even when the saints pass away. The torch has been passed from father to son, from Abraham to Isaac. And as for Ishmael, he said, I have heard you. Behold, I will bless him, and I will make him fruitful and multiply him exceedingly. And he shall become the father of 12 princes. And I will make him a great nation. Abraham had always had a special place in his heart for Ishmael. Only with reluctance and under great pressure did Abraham send his son away. And we remember reading that. He really didn't want to send his son away, but the Lord the Lord who told him that listen to your wife, and he sent them both away. Go ahead, Tila.
Well, this is what I found interesting, because in verse 1, it refers to taking the wife Keturah. But then
Right.
back down in 12, he comes right back and says Hagar. He doesn't call her Keturah. The writings don't call her Keturah there. They call her Hagar. You would think that 12 verses later, they would have said Keturah again, but they don't.
So they say Hagar.
They
You're
say
right.
Hagar.
You're right. And that's what I'm saying, because in the Midrash, in fact, in letter B of number 4, Abraham dies at 175. 175 is the fill-in. And this is what I wanted to get at. The Midrash, where I picked up a lot of this understanding. The Midrash, Keturah and Hagar are actually the same person. And that comes from the Midrash. You have the Midrash, Tila.
I know.
Okay, and then in letter D, Keturah's sons received gifts from Abraham. Okay. All right, go ahead, Maria.
In the book of Jasper, it said that Abraham would visit his son Ishmael. So their camps were close together, that they visit each other. They were close, but not that close, far away,
Yeah.
but they kept in touch.
And you would think that if they were pretty close like that, we know that she found an Egyptian woman to marry her son, Ishmael. So going all the way back down to Egypt, maybe it did happen. How long she was there, who knows? Because the 12 tribes are in the land of Canaan. So sometime they would have to have left Egypt to settle in the land of Canaan. Were you going to say something, Janie? Just press it up, but you don't need a light. It's on.
I'm wondering if with these names, because when I read in the Old Testament, I frequently have to reread or ask someone who actually knows what they have read or what I'm reading about the names of people, because it's my understanding that sometimes names are a type a type of person. So
Mhm.
is that a possibility or not?
That is a very possibility. And what I found, and a lot of times when we go through our Torah, you read about a name, but it seems like the meaning of that name is not given out until after that person had done something. Because, in other words, you get a name of a person and it means this. Well, it meant that, but when did they get that name? Did they get it before the person did it or afterwards? It seems like in Torah, the names come about later on. I would imagine, it could mean that, Janie. It's, on all these, we read, like, I think Pastor Bruce hit on something perfect, when he said about the Muslim people, they're a bunch of donkeys. They're, and, the word,
Wild.
they're wild, yeah, wild donkeys. Okay, let's move on before so we can finish up. Okay, Abraham would have been content with God's purposes and promises to have been fulfilled in Ishmael. And we read that way back. He petitioned God to look with favor upon his son in Genesis 17:18. God refused to substitute this child for the child of promise. Isaac was the child of promise. But he did promise to make him a great nation. So in verses 13 to 16, it record the names of the sons of Ishmael, who were the 12 promised princes. Once again, God kept his promise to his servant Abraham. Ishmael died at the age of 137 and was buried. Notice that he was not said to have been placed in the cave of Machpelah, for this was a monument of hope for the people of promise. The land of Canaan was not to be the possession of Ishmael nor his descendants. Rather, we are told, and they settled from Havdalah to Shur, which is east of Egypt. As one goes towards Assyria, he settled in defiance of all his relatives. In this verse, one more promise is shown to be fulfilled, the promise God made to Hagar years before. And he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. And he will live to the east of his brothers. Genesis 16:12. So one thing I wanted to touch on, in Genesis 24:60, we read, they blessed Rebekah and said to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them. Rebekah's mother and her brother Laban pronounced a wonderful blessing upon her. But then it says, for the gate for those who hate them. This is almost identical to when you read about Isaac, when Isaac was going to be sacrificed. In Genesis 22:16-17, it says, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done these things, and I have not withheld you have not withheld your son, your only son. Indeed, I will greatly bless you. I will greatly multiply your seed as the stars of the heavens and as the sands which are on the seashore, and your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies. Again, it's mentioned there. So the phrase possess the gate of their enemies, or as we read, the gate of those who hate them. The interpretation seems more in line with seeking peace before resulting in war. And that's what we see in both scriptures, that ultimately they are going to try to gain peace. instead of a battle or war. And it seems like that's the way it is with the Jewish people today. You know, they would always prefer peace. But the problem with the people today, that it was, maybe it was an issue back then. Today, it's like they'll give up their land to get peace, which they cannot give up the land that God possesses. Only God can do that. But let's get to the last fill-ins. And Roman numeral, I think I put 6, that should be 5, right? The blessings given by God to Abraham is passed on to Isaac. And in letter A, both Isaac and Ishmael bury their father with Sarah in the cave of Machpelah. I think it was wonderful that the two brothers, for a short time, came together, reconciled, buried their father along with his wife Sarah. And that is our Torah study for today. Go ahead, Maria.
Not over to Maria Singers.
Now, when I was reading the Midrash and from the book of Jasper, God kept telling Abraham, like at the age of 90, you're going to be the father of millions. You count the stars and you'll count the sand. And then he became 100. And God came to Abraham and said, you're going to be the father. You won't even be able to count them. They're going to be like the sands. And then he became 110. And God came back and said, I promise you. And I counted that about 5 times God gave that promise, and he just kept getting older and older. I know that 140, he started having all these kids, but you know,
He was in the prime of his life.
When I ask for something, and I know that God has promised this, and I don't get it, because I thought of Pastor Bruce. I read that Kanye West in 1 week lost almost $2 billion. And right away, Felicia said, and Pastor Bruce said that we're going to get some of it. So we're waiting for that.
Amen. Amen.